Rama Ramanathan. I'm the spokesperson for CAGED, and I'm the moderator for this evening. We will be speaking about enforced disappearances in Malaysia, specifically how to end enforced disappearances in Malaysia. I'm just going to put on the screen now the agenda so that you have an idea of what we'll be talking about, and you'll have a sense of time, how much time we will spend on each item. So we will first begin with a video, which will be basically me talking for about 10 minutes. And it's called Remembering Amri and Raymond on the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances, because that day is tomorrow. Then we will have a message by Norhayati Ariffin, the wife of Amri Che Mat. She will not be on live because we've had a lot of problems connecting with her. She's calling in from Kanga and we've had a lot of problems with the line. However, there is a video that she has made. It's just a short video and I will show that. And an item that you do not see on the screen is a short video by Esther Koh, the daughter of Pastor Raymond Koh. And she's going to talk about what she misses most about her father. Then we will have Susanna Liu, the wife of Pastor Raymond Koh. And then we will have the main course, which is Dr. Yazid Zul Kepeli. I will introduce him later, but he's from the law faculty of the International Islamic University of Malaysia. And we will also have a response from Andrew Khoo of the Malaysian Bar. I will also introduce him later. And then we will have time for Q&A. So altogether, we will spend about 1.5 hours, including the Q&A, and we will end by 10 p.m. Malaysian time. Yeah. All right. Let me now launch the video. Hello. Tomorrow is the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. Tomorrow, many Malaysians will remember Amri Che Mat, Ruth and Joshua Hilmi, and Raymond Koh. In recent times, these 4 persons are the best-known disappeared persons in Malaysia. In this video, I will give an overview of Suhakam's findings and recommendations in the cases of Amri and Raymond. Suhakam, the National Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, a body established by law, conducted an 18-month investigation into the disappearances of Amri and Raymond. The investigation included 45 days of public hearings. The first hearing date was in October 2017. The last was in December 2018. There were 24 witnesses for the Amri case and 16 witnesses for the Raymond case. Many of the witnesses were from the police and the religious authorities. The hearings were chaired by Datuk Ma Weng Kwai. There were 2 other panelists, Professor Dr. Aisha Bidin and Dr. Nick Salida Suhaila. Ma is a retired judge of the Court of Appeal, while Aisha and Nick Salida teach law at public universities in Malaysia. On the 3rd of April 2019, the Suhakam panel issued its final decisions in the form of 2 reports running into a total of 196 pages. They concluded that Amri and Raymond are victims of enforced disappearance because the evidence shows they were abducted by the KL office of the Special Branch, a division of the Royal Malaysian Police. There were 4 common features in their abductions. First, the modus operandi was the same. Both victims were driving. They were forced to stop by abductors who used a boxing-in technique. With this technique, the victim's car is forced to stop because abductors box the victim by positioning cars in front of, beside, and behind the victim's car. The boxing in is clearly seen in video footage from security cameras in homes next to the spot where Raymond was abducted. Experts who have watched the video say the abduction was executed professionally. Second, both men were persons of interest to the religious authorities of their respective states. Amri's house in the state of Perlis had been visited by about 24 persons comprised of Islamic officials and police personnel. They entered the house and took photos. According to the Mufti, the chief religious officer of the state, the heavily manned visit was because he had received complaints that Amri was engaging in practices which are unique to the Shiite expression of Islam, which is allegedly forbidden in Malaysia. A Thanksgiving dinner hosted by Raymond in a church in his home state of Selangor was similarly visited by Islamic officials and police personnel. Raymond was perceived to have engaged in attempts to persuade Muslims to exit the Islamic faith and enter Christian faith. Numerous police reports were later made against him by Muslims. However, no charges were ever brought against Raymond. Third, both men were under surveillance by the Special Branch. Special Branch officers admitted this under oath during the Amri hearings. Raymond's wife testified that she and Raymond were often stopped at Malaysian immigration checkpoints and taken for questioning by the Special Branch. Fourth, a gold Toyota Vios. In both cases, there is eyewitness testimony that a gold-colored Toyota Vios car was involved. This car has been shown to belong to Saiful Bahari, an employee of the Special Branch. The police tried to hide the fact that he worked for the Special Branch, but thanks to information revealed by a police insider, the truth was revealed. The police claimed that they could not locate Saiful Bahari. People familiar with the cases wonder whether Saiful Bahari may be a fifth disappeared person, together with Amri, Raymond, Joshua, and Ruth. What is striking about the cases is the speed with which police acted initially and then slowed down and, seemingly, stopped doing anything. What I mean by this is that before they knew the identities of the victims, the police moved at a decent, though not perfect, pace. But after the identities of the victims were known, the rate of progress slowed down and may have come to a complete halt. Except, that is, for false claims and probable fabrication of evidence. The most shocking false claim was made by the then Inspector General of Police, Khalid Abu Bakar. He claimed photos of Raymond, his house and car were found in the home of a suspect whom the police had shot dead in Kedah. By this means, he suggested 63-year-old Raymond had been abducted by a drug, firearms, and human smuggling ring. Khalid's claim was examined by the Suhakam panel. They interviewed several police witnesses. Suhakam concluded that their evidence was so full of holes that the only logical conclusion is that the police fabricated or planted the evidence and testimony. I'll now move on to shortcomings in the police work observed by Suhakam. I'll mention 5 in each case. In Amri's case, the shortcomings were: 1. The investigation officer was appointed late, thus losing critical time. 2. Misclassification as a case of missing person rather than abduction. 3. Appointing a junior officer, one with only 6 months' experience, as investigating officer. 4. Late recording of crucial witness statements. One witness was interviewed 11 months late, another 14 months late. 5. Reluctance to treat Saiful Bahari, owner of the Toyota Vios, as a suspect, and to reveal information about him to Suhakam. In Raymond's case, the shortcomings were: 1. 2-hour delay in interviewing a witness who claimed to have seen an abduction. This lost critical time. 2. 3-day delay in arranging photo fit identification of an abductor whom the eyewitness thought he could identify. 3. Failure to obtain CCTV recordings. Eventually, the recordings were obtained by Raymond's family. 4. Delay of 12 hours in requesting last ping information for Raymond's phone. 5. Failure to thoroughly search the area of the last ping. Now I come to the recommendations of the panel. The panel recommended: 1. Authorities must respect freedom of religion as a fundamental human right, in accordance with the Federal Constitution of Malaysia. 2. There must be clear demarcation between the police and the religious authorities, since there is confusion over whether the police can aid the religious authorities in forcing compliance with their opinions. 3. reforms to standard police operating procedures. These are about sharing of information by the police with statutory bodies such as Suhakam, clearly defining the difference between missing persons and abducted persons, and increasing the accountability of the special branch. 4. Establishing an independent mechanism to oversee the police, such as an Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission, popularly called an IPCMC. 5. Setting up a special task force to investigate the disappearances of Amri and Raymond. An important aspect of this recommendation is that the task force should reopen and re-investigate the cases as enforced disappearances instead of as missing persons. 6. And finally, legal reforms. These include 1. Amendments to the law to make enforced disappearance an offense separate from the offenses of abduction and kidnapping. And 2. Ratifying the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Tomorrow it will be over 17 months since Suhakam published its conclusions. It will be over 14 months since the government appointed a so-called task force. It will be over 45 months since Amri was disappeared, and over 43 months since Raymond was disappeared. CAGED calls upon the Home Minister to publish the findings of the investigation task force and to inform the public what disciplinary and prosecutorial actions have been taken against any public officials implicated in the enforced disappearance of Amri and Raymond. We call upon the public to ask, where are Amri and Raymond every time they meet a politician, regardless of whether the politician is a member of the government or of the opposition? Thank you for your attention. Signing off for CAGED, I am Rama Ramanathan. I had hoped to have Norhayati Ariffin, the wife of Amri Che Mat, with us here live today. But unfortunately, we've had a lot of problems connecting with her. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a video that we anticipated that there might be this problem with connectivity. So we had her prepare a video. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share that video with you.
Selamat pagi dan terima kasih diucapkan kerana memberi peluang kepada saya untuk berbicara pada pagi ini. Selama hampir 4 tahun kami menunggu kepulangan atau kehilangan secara paksa. Bagi saya dan anak-anak perempuan saya, ia merupakan satu yang sangat sukar, satu yang sangat menyakitkan. Merindui suami, merindui seorang ayah, tempat bermanja, tempat bergantung harapan adalah satu yang sangat menyakitkan. Kami melalui kehidupan tidak seperti orang biasa. Kami terpaksa menghadapi tomahan dari masyarakat. Saya tahu kes ini sangat serius dan ia bukan satu yang mudah. Dan saya dapat merasakan bahawa kemenangan amat sukar untuk memihak kepada pihak saya. Namun begitu, jutaan terima kasih yang tidak terhingga ingin saya ucapkan kepada pihak Suhakam yang telah banyak membantu, banyak menyokong kami dalam membuat keputusan yang begitu berani. Tetapi apa yang sangat mengecewakan adalah dari unit task force yang ditubuhkan sehingga ke hari ini masih tiada sebarang makluman, masih tiada sebarang berita yang kami terima. Sudah hampir setahun ia berlalu begitu sahaja. Akhir sekali, saya merayu, saya memohon kepada kerajaan Malaysia agar mengambil perhatian, mengambil tindakan terhadap kes kehilangan ini. Saya berharap agar suara saya didengari. Sekian, terima kasih.
I am now going to play the next video, which is by Esther Koh. She's the daughter of Pastor Raymond Koh. This is a very last-minute production. She only made it today, but the emotion and the sense of loss comes across so strongly that I thought it was important to share it with you.
The thing I miss most about my dad is his presence. My dad is a very kind and attentive father who tries his best to spend time with us, despite having a busy job. He is the person who has taught me much about life. My earliest memories of my dad is when he bought me a Christmas tree just because I wanted a Christmas tree in my room, and he brought me to the shop, and it was a white color and had lots of stars all over it. But one memory that stuck with me until today is when I was in primary school. There was this popular book series where if you are my age, you would know this book. It's called Sweet Valley High, and all the girls were reading it. So I wanted to read it too, and my friend, tuition friend, agreed to lend me her book, which she borrowed from her school library, with the condition that I would return it to her before the due date. Unfortunately, on the night before the due date is when I only remembered I needed to return it to her. And so I approached my dad and I said, "Dad, I need to return this book to my friend." And then I passed my dad her address, which she had written on a piece of paper. These were the times where there was no handphone yet. So when my dad saw the address, his jaw dropped. And I remember he was thinking of what he should do next. But what he did next is what made me remember this incident until today. My dad just said to me, "Go into the car now, or we will not make it back in time for bedtime because you have school tomorrow." To cut a long story short, my dad drove all the way to my friend's house. I returned her the book, and the rest is history. But the point I'm trying to make is that my dad is he's a person who would go all out to help someone, even if it was out of his way. He would do it. If it was late at night, he was willing to help. If he was in the middle of something, he would drop everything and attend to people's needs. And I can say this because he would often be rushing here and there, helping people with various things, which would be impossible for me to list down all the things right now. But he would always be helping someone with something. Whether it's helping them to find a job, or visiting them in the hospital, or just taking them out for a cup of coffee, listening to them, chatting with them, and just like caring and being with them is what he does, is what a day in his life looks like. For example, a lady once told me that when her car broke down, she called my dad, and my dad came so fast. She said she was really touched. But what really hurts about his abduction is that they took someone who is really important to me. They took someone who was important in his community. My dad, he carried me when I was small. He took care of me. He told me stories. He made me he made sure I was okay. And it hurts to think that some group out there would do something like this to him.
Sure. It's a very touching sharing. Bring on Susanna Koh. Susanna is, of course, the wife of Pastor Raymond Koh. And I'm going to hand this over to you, Susanna.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Tomorrow we'll be remembering the victims of enforced disappearance. And this is Raymond Koh. And we will never forget what happened to him. And it's been 3.5 years since the abduction of Pastor Raymond, and we do not have any news or any update, and we don't know where he is, and we do not know how he is, his condition. It's been pretty difficult for the family, and you heard from Esther. What we really miss most about Pastor Raymond is his loving and caring nature, and the fact that he helps and accepts people from every race or religion. He doesn't discriminate people. And so we have no choice but to file a civil suit against the police and the government in February 2020. And the court case should be coming out soon. Now, how have all these challenges changed me? Well, it has made me stronger. It has made me more independent. And it has made me more courageous. And I really couldn't believe that a quiet housewife can turn into a garang, fierce lady. In fact, I received an award, the International Woman of Courage 2020 from the US State Department because of speaking out for enforced disappearance. And I also realized that I have to stand up for my rights and not be intimidated by threats. One of the most disappointing things that I have experienced in this past 3.5 years is that the way that the police and the government has handled these cases of enforced disappearance they are supposed to uphold law and order, but sadly they were the ones that violated human rights as enshrined in the Federal Constitution and also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we need to speak out. We cannot remain silent. If we do, we are complicit. And one of my wish is that no one has to suffer what we have gone through. We, as citizens of Malaysia, should not allow such acts against humanity to continue. If we allow it, the police and the government will be emboldened. And we appeal to the authorities to ratify the ICPPED and also to set up the IPCMC. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for Rama and Kesh for hosting this webinar.
Thank you very much, Susanna. This is a very difficult day for you, I know, and I know that for you and for Yati, after the tragic events, that happened in November and in February, it's very hard. And now we feel the empathy also with people all over the world, because it's not just in Malaysia that it happens, but it happens everywhere. So thank you for being willing to share with us tonight. I'm now going to bring into the studio bring on Dr. Yazid Zul Kepeli. Let me just bring him on. I'd like to just introduce Dr. Yazid. I actually have never met him in person, but I heard him speak at a webinar that IIUM organized, I'm going to say about 3-4 weeks ago. And I was very taken up by the comments that he made. And he is a scholar. He teaches at the International Islamic University. He has a PhD from the University of Hong Kong. And he is the author, is a published author of a couple of books, which I probably will never understand because they seem very complex subjects. But what I like about his profile is that he's very much an Islamic scholar, but also a legal scholar and someone who has a heart for human rights. So I'm now going to hand the time over to Dr. Yazid. He will speak for about 25 minutes, and then I will introduce the respondent, who is Andrew Khoo. So now over to you, Dr. Yazid. And you'll need to share the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to share your screen?
Can you see the screen?
Yes, I see it now, and I'm going to edit. There we go. And I'm going to give you full screen. Maybe.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe I can start now.
Yes, you can start.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good night to everyone. My name is Dr. Yazid Zul Kepeli from International Islamic University, Malaysia. Before I became law lecturer in International Islamic University, Malaysia, I used to work as a lawyer. I used to work as a lawyer for a few years. And then I proceed for my doctorate, for my PhD in the University of Hong Kong for around 4 years. And after that, I came back to Malaysia. I'm also the author of Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Financing of Terrorism Law in Malaysia. So one of my latest book is this one by LexisNexis. I take note that before this, we have a corruption issue and also anti-money laundering problem, but we don't have a proper textbook. before this. So me and my colleague, Professor Norhayati Ariffin, we prepared this book, Anti-Money Laundering, Law, Anti-Money Laundering and Counter Financing of Terrorism Law in Malaysia. So this is the first book on anti-money laundering in Malaysia in the last decade. So I hope it will provide a clearer guideline for prosecution and everything related to anti-money laundering. I'm also involved in training law enforcement agencies, including police force and also counter-terrorist unit from Malaysia and also for foreign government as well. So I'm very much involved in training police officer and law enforcement officers. My latest book is about cryptocurrency and digital assets law in Malaysia. It's out this month. I'm also involved in training. Okay, now let us go to this issue. First, before we proceed, some of you out there might wonder, what is enforced disappearance? In language, we call it kehilangan paksa. Kehilangan paksa. So what is basically this enforced disappearance? Okay, in simple word, enforced disappearance happen when a person is secretly kidnapped, abducted, or imprisoned by a state or political organization by a third party with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of a state or political organization, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the person's fate and the whereabouts with the intent of placing the victim outside the protection of the law. In simple words, when we talk about enforced disappearance, we're talking about a situation where the government send the government agents to kidnap and sometimes murder someone after that outside the boundary of law. This is a problem. This is a global phenomenon. This happens in various countries. So in simple words, enforced disappearance refers to a situation where someone is secretly abducted and usually after that kidnapped, imprisoned, and sometimes murdered by state using the agent of the state. Just a brief glimpse. In Algeria, around 6,000 to 17,000 enforced disappearance. Usually we have it when there's a political turmoil in the country. When we have this kind of situation, usually we have a large scale enforced disappearance. So in Algeria, we have around 6,000 to 17,000 cases of enforced disappearance. The government admit around 1,000. The NGO allege around 17,000. And then in Argentina, between 1976 to 1983, we have up to around 30,000 cases, okay? Up to around 30,000 people suffering in enforced disappearance. So very big number, 30,000. In Iraq, at least 10,000 of people disappeared during the regime of Saddam Hussein, many of them during Operation Anfal. During this time, tens of thousands of people disappeared. This is in Iraq. In Syria, we have ongoing crisis in Syria because of the civil war. We have an estimate of 82,000 enforced disappearance cases, a very big number in Syria. And then in Sri Lanka, we have around 60,000 to 100,000 cases of enforced disappearance. We know that in Sri Lanka, there used to be a war between the government and the LTTE. And long story short, we have around an estimate of 60,000 to 100,000 enforced disappearance cases in Sri Lanka. Okay, before we proceed to Malaysia, some of you might wonder, some of the audience might wonder, oh, in Malaysia, this doesn't seem like a big issue because we don't have this kind of number. We don't have like 82,000 or 60,000 or 100,000 cases of enforced disappearance. We just have a few cases of enforced disappearance. But my suspected enforced disappearance. But my question is like this. That is really not the right way to think about it. What if it is your son? What if it is your daughter? What if it is your mother or your father? Will you still say the same? Oh, the number is not so big. It's not really a serious problem in Malaysia. That is the wrong way to think about it. Even if we just have a few cases, we must take note that all cases are serious when we talk about enforced disappearance. It can be your mother, it can be your father, it can be your children. So all of us must be in this fight together, regardless of our race, religion, political background, ideology. We should be Malaysian. We should be human first when it comes to this matter. Okay, I want to read something. Victims are put in terrible situation of helplessness and vulnerability with no access to medical help or legal support. The risk that victims of enforced disappearance become also victims of torture, sexual violence, or other inhuman treatment is very high. In many cases, victims are even killed. Families and friends are left behind in despair without the possibility to support the victims. Not knowing whether someone you love is alive or dead is probably one of the heaviest burdens to bear. To a certain extent, we can say that this enforced disappearance is to a certain extent even more serious than murder. When someone is murdered, for example, when a family member is murdered, you can mourn, you can feel sad, you can go to the grave, you can have a closure and move on. But when we talk about enforced disappearance, it's like your kid has been kidnapped. You cannot move on. You will never be able to just move on because you will always wonder about their fate. Are they okay? Are they being tortured? Are they fine? So you will always be in this dilemma. So enforced disappearance is a very terrible thing, and we must take note of the seriousness of it. Okay, how can we prevent enforced disappearance? In Malaysia, there are many ways. First, we need to educate the society about enforced disappearance because we need to get the public support. Without public support, it will be very hard to push any new agenda. For example, if you want to improve the law and all, in most cases, we need public support. In order to get the public support, we need to educate the society about this issue. If they are not even aware of this issue, they will not do anything. So the first thing, we need to educate the society. We need to get the public support. If we have the public support, we will have the political will because we need a strong political will to make changes. Next is signing and ratifying international treaty, for example, like International Convention on the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearance. Okay, some of you might wonder, why should we sign international treaty? Couldn't we just pass our law? The answer is yes, if we are passing relevant laws to prevent enforced disappearance. But the truth is that in many cases, if we did not sign international treaty, there will not be all this necessary national law. I will explain more on this shortly. We need to pass national legislation to prevent enforced disappearance and to protect and to give remedies to the victims and family. And we need to develop a culture of accountability, check and balance. Okay, first let me explain about this international convention. I understand when we talk about international convention or international human rights instrument, many Malaysians are very skeptical. They might think, oh, this is just an attempt by Western power to interfere with Malaysia or our sovereignty. But this is not really true. We need to understand the context. First, let me explain what is International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. This international convention provides for right not to be subjected to enforced disappearance, as well as the right for the relative of disappeared person to know the truth. This will provide access to information, which is very important. The convention gives victims' families the right to seek reparations and to demand the truth about the disappearance of their loved one. The convention contains several provisions concerning prevention, investigation, and sanctioning of this crime, as well as the rights of the victims and the relative and the wrongful removal of children born during captivity in certain scenarios. The convention set forth the obligation of international cooperation, both in suppression of the practice and in dealing with the humanitarian aspect related to the crime. Now, let me explain in simple language. Basically, what will happen if Malaysia sign and ratify this international convention for the prevention of enforced disappearance? What will happen actually if Malaysian government sign and ratify the convention? First, Malaysia must ensure that no one shall be subjected to enforced disappearance. Malaysia cannot use any exceptional circumstances whatsoever, whether a state of war or threat of war or internal political instability, or any other public emergency as a justification for enforced disappearance. Okay, let me explain. In Malaysia right now, we have emergency law. And sometimes the power given for emergency law can be very wide. We have SOSMA, we have all this kind of law. It is very important. If we sign this treaty, we need to understand this treaty prohibit enforced disappearance in all situations, even during war. In other words, even during war, we must still observe the rule of law. We cannot just kidnap someone and kill someone without going for trial, without giving a fair opportunity for that person to defend themselves. In other words, Malaysia, we cannot allow enforced disappearance in all situations. We must always observe the law. So this is one of the significance of the convention. Malaysia shall take the necessary measure to ensure that enforced disappearance constitute an offence under its criminal law. So we must make sure there's a law to prosecute enforced disappearance. And then Malaysia cannot use any order or instruction from authority as justification for enforced disappearance. So basically a police officer, for example, cannot just kill someone or special branch or anyone, and then they just say, oh, I'm just following order. I'm just following order from my superior. They cannot do that. Malaysia cannot use any order or instruction from authority as a justification for enforced disappearance. Malaysia shall guarantee the rights of victims of enforced disappearance to an effective remedy. Malaysia shall ensure that any person tried for an offence of enforced disappearance shall benefit from a fair trial before a competent, independent and impartial court or tribunal established by law. Even if a police officer, for example, is being accused of committing an offence of enforced disappearance, the government cannot keep it hidden. In other words, there must be a fair trial, even for the police officer charged for enforced disappearance. And in other words, it ensures fairness to all. It ensures fairness to all. The essence of this convention is to ensure justice. Malaysia shall also ensure appropriate steps be taken where necessary to ensure that complainant, witness, relative, and their defense counsel, as well as person participating in investigation, are protected from all ill treatment. We don't want the family of the person to be intimidated or to be threatened, okay? That cannot be allowed as a consequence of the complaint or evidence given. Malaysia shall also ensure that where there are reasonable grounds for believing that a person has been subjected to enforced disappearance, the authorities shall undertake an investigation, even if there has been no formal complaint. In Malaysia, in many cases, the police can say, oh, actually we cannot do anything. We cannot do anything unless we have a written complaint. Anything, we must first wait for police report. Even if there's a video circulating, there's a lot of evidence and all that, in many cases, the police refuse to do anything unless there's a police report. By signing the convention, Malaysia shall ensure that where there are reasonable grounds for believing that a person has been subjected to enforced disappearance, the authorities shall undertake an investigation. In other words, as long as there's a reasonable ground, the authorities should investigate. Malaysia must also ensure that no one shall be held in secret detention. Secret detention or secret prison can be very dangerous because suddenly people disappear, go to secret prison, and then the next thing we know, they might be killed or something like that. So Malaysia must make sure there's no secret prison or secret detention. Okay, the next one. Malaysia shall also ensure the training of law enforcement personnel, civil or military, medical personnel, public official, and other person who may be involved in the custody or treatment of any person deprived of liberty, including the education and information regarding the relevant provision of this convention. In other words, if Malaysia sign this convention, Malaysia must train the law enforcement personnel, the police, the special branch and all, so that they will observe the provision of this convention to ensure justice and fairness to everyone. And then Malaysia shall take measures to search, locate, and release disappeared person, and in the event of death, to locate, respect, and return their remains. If in reality the person has already been killed, for example, the government need to locate, release the disappeared person if the person is alive, and in the event of that, to respect and return the remains to the family. And then Malaysia must ensure that the victims have a right to obtain reparation and a prompt, fair and adequate compensation. So there must be compensation as well. So those are the some of the obligations of Malaysia if Malaysia signed the international treaty. Now let us look at some of the benefits and challenges of using international human rights treaty to prevent enforced disappearance. Okay, let me go briefly. The first one, if we sign this international convention, this will strengthen the protection for everyone under the federal constitution. In Malaysia, the highest law is the Perlembagaan, is the federal constitution. The federal constitution guarantees fundamental liberties. So the CAGED is the short form for the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearance. The CAGED is generally consistent with the spirit of federal constitution that respect and ensure human rights and dignity of individuals. We have Article 149. Article 149 allow for all this emergency law and all that. To ensure protection against enforced disappearance, if amendment can also be made, for example, to clarify that even under emergency, enforced disappearance is prohibited. This will also be a very good addition. From time to time, we have made amendment to the federal constitution for improvement. So this is also a possible good amendment. Okay, this will also close legal gaps and loopholes. By following this international convention, we will close any legal gaps and loopholes provided that the terms of the convention are implemented by the government. I will explain this concept soon. Okay, this is one of the points. One of the major benefits of following this international convention is that it will lead or push for the creation of new law. This can be seen as a result of following other conventions in the past. A simple example is like this. Child rights. Malaysia has a number of laws that not only aim at preventing violation of child rights, but also to ensure the care and rehabilitation of children, such as under Child Act 2001, which was enacted to fulfill its obligation after acceding to the Convention of the Rights of Child in 1995. Long story short, we have international law, international convention, basically convention on the right of child. After Malaysia, we follow, we sign, we ratify, we agree to follow this convention on the right of child. As a result, we passed Child Act 2001, which is a huge improvement. It gives a lot of benefit for the protection of children. Another example can be seen from the convention on the elimination of all discrimination against women. So what I'm trying to say is, before this, Malaysia has been signing other international treaty when it is good for Malaysian. One is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. As a result, we signed this convention, there's amendment to penal code to increase penalty for certain offences, including rape and incest. We also introduced Anti-Trafficking in Person Act. As a result of that, we also make amendment to Domestic Violence Act, definition of domestic violence to include emotional, mental, physical form of violence, and also amendment to improve protection for survivors of abuse, and also some amendment to Employment Act. Okay, what I'm trying to say here is, by ratifying, by following this international convention, it lead to a creation of various national law which can be very useful for the citizen. Okay, long story short, by signing the international treaty, it pushed for the creation of various important national law. And then as a result, we also have creation of a dedicated committee to fight enforced disappearance. And then we have a monitoring by the international community, by other countries as well. So the idea is like this. When we sign this international committee, when we sign this international convention, all of the countries will be looking out for each other. So for example, if there's enforced disappearance cases in another country, we will be monitoring it to ensure it did not happen. Also for Malaysia, other countries will be monitoring it as well to monitor the situation to make sure that enforced disappearance will not happen in Malaysia. So this is good. We become part of a global community for something good, for something peace. It can also expedite extradition in certain cases. It will also improve Malaysia's standing and reputation. We can also improve coordination with non-governmental and human rights organizations. The most important thing is because it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. Regardless of our race, religion and all, we should all agree that no one should be kidnapped and killed, for example, outside the boundary of law. We should be a nation that abide law. Anything should be according to law. No one, regardless of the accusation, should be subjected to enforced disappearance, just kidnap and kill. If someone really commit any offense, we should charge them in court and let justice be done. Okay, there are certain concerns related to international convention. I give a simple example. In 2019, it was reported that the police seized 6 improvised explosive device and 15 bullets, which were meant to be used by terrorist group to attack places of worship following the death of Muhammad Adib. If you still remember last year, okay. So what happened is there was a terrorist attack plan to avenge Muhammad Adib. And then in October 2019, last year, the police announced that they have fought 25 planned terrorist attacks in Malaysia since 2013, including several large-scale strikes on Christian, Hindu, and Buddhist house of worship. Okay, so what happened here is we must take note that terrorism is a serious problem in Malaysia. So some people have been arguing that if we sign all these human rights treaties, instrument, or this convention on the protection of all persons against enforced disappearance, it might interfere with national interest or counter-terrorism operation. I want to assure you all that this is not true. This is without basis. Let me explain. Even in Malaysia, although we have threat of terrorism, for example, so far our counter-terrorism unit, our E8, our police force, our army have been managing this threat using law without problem. The meaning is that we do have law. We do have law to counter to all this kind of national threat. There's no need, there's no justification for enforced disappearance, to kidnap and to kill someone outside the boundary of law. Just to clarify, I'm not accusing anyone or the police or the special force or the special branch of doing anything illegal, because the investigation are still ongoing. So I believe there should be proper investigation and all that. But at the same time, we must all agree that we should put the necessary measures in place, for example, the legal framework to prevent enforced disappearance from happening in Malaysia. Okay, some of the concerns are that international human rights instrument can be a backdoor to new type of colonialism. There might be unfair reporting or biased reporting against Malaysia, refusal to be subjected to international monitoring, national security concerns. Some allege that Malaysia human rights record is already good. It is not legally required. It might lead to interference with domestic sovereignty. But we must take note, if all countries use this kind of argument, therefore there will be no international cooperation, and this is a big step backward. The idea here is we need to understand, we might be people of different race, different religion, different political background and ideology. But I think we all can agree that no one should be allowed to kidnap our children or our father and our mother and then just kill them outside the boundary of law, regardless of the accusation. Even if there's accusation, even in terrorism cases, there should be due process. The person should be charged in court, there should be evidence. No one should be kidnapped and killed outside the boundary of law. So don't think about this case as something far away, but instead think about our beloved one, our children, our parents. We don't want anything like that to happen to them. I have a kid. This kid of mine, he went missing in KLCC Garden just for a few minutes. Okay, he's 4 years old. 4 years old, just for a few minutes. I was looking at the younger one, and then when I look back at the older son, he's not there, and it's like the scariest day of my life. And this just happened for like 1 minute or 2 minutes. I searched for him and I found it back after like 1 minute. but that was like the scariest 1 minute of my life. Can you imagine that happening to you for years, waiting for your beloved one? Long story short, there's no justification for enforced disappearance. That will be all. I'm looking forward later to receive your question and all. I hope the session has been beneficial to everyone. Thank you a lot for your participation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yazid. That has been an excellent presentation. I think you did even better this time around than the first time I heard you. I think we gave you a little more time. So it's really very refreshing to hear this perspective from a Muslim legal scholar, and to make it so personal. I think that that's a very important thing. And thank you for sharing that story about your son also. The next person that I'm going to bring on is Andrew Khoo. Andrew is someone that I met, I think, about 12 years ago. And he is someone who is very much associated with the Malaysian Bar. I'm never certain whether it's the Bar Council of Malaysia or the Malaysian Bar. But it is a great pleasure to have Andrew on this show tonight, or rather this webinar. Andrew is someone who has been so active in the human rights field. I think he's one of these people that, it's like he just goes from meeting to meeting to meeting, and he's involved in so many different things, and he has won awards. So I'm very thankful that he agreed to be the respondent today. Over to you, Andrew. And I'm going to leave the rest of us on screen so that you don't feel you're just talking to a screen. At least you'll see some of us.
Thank you, Rama. I hope you can hear me. And good evening to all of you, and also for those who are watching in on this webinar. Actually, Rama, if there's any thanks or gratitude or admiration that should be expressed tonight, it should be to you and to CAGED for your tireless efforts at publicizing this particular issue and highlighting to the Malaysian public what exactly is going on in the Suhakam inquiries, and both for Pastor Raymond and for Amri, and now, of course, currently ongoing for Joshua Hilmi and Ruth Sitepu. One of the, I suppose, benefits of being the last speaker, and especially after Dr. Yazid's really excellent presentation, is that there's very little left for me to say, which is good. So I don't think I'll take up all the 15 minutes, but allow me to make a few personal comments. And here I speak on behalf of myself and not the Bar Council or the Malaysian Bar. I just have five points that I would like to make. As I said, most of them have already been touched upon, but I just have some additional remarks. So the first thing, of course, is we talk about criminalizing in Malaysia the act of enforced disappearance. Now, I think this is very important because, as has already been pointed out, enforced disappearance is not just another abduction case or another kidnapping case. There is the very important element of the use or abuse of official power and authority. So, there has to be authorization, there has to be support or acquiescence by the government or government body, agency, law enforcement agency, etc., as on this particular disappearance. So if you don't have a specific law or a specific offense of enforced disappearance, some people may think that you're not really taking this seriously, and you're not really sending a signal to law enforcement authorities and others. What the government needs to make clear is that this is an action that the government will not tolerate. It's not going to accept the commission of this offense. And having a specific offense or a specific law prohibiting enforced disappearance will, I think, send that signal. And I think this is important because, Rama, in your introduction, you talked about a man called Saiful Bahari Abdul Aziz. And you and I have talked about him before. And I've often remarked to you that he's actually the fifth enforced disappearance victim because, but sadly, no one seems to be caring very much about him, right? He's supposed to be either a civilian employee of the special branch. He's been clarified as not being a police officer. But then he supposedly went on leave, and I think Malaysia Kini had a report that his immediate supervisor let him go on something like 57 days leave without really caring what had happened to him. And then the police have said, oh well, he's resigned from the whatever employment that he's had with the police, but yet nobody can seem to find him. Nobody knows where he is. No one's come forward to actually launch a report with Sohakam saying, can you help us find this person? So, I mean, the fact that a person can disappear, go unnoticed, and the police are not interested, the police don't seem to care, and life just goes on for the rest of us, I think goes to show the lack of gravity that we attach to the offense of enforced disappearance. And so I just reiterate the point that, we have to have a specific offense or a specific act that criminalizes enforced disappearance. So that would be my first point. My second point touches on the international conventions. And again, Dr. Yazid has given an excellent presentation on the structure of the convention. All I would say is that the way the way government in Malaysia approaches international conventions since the time of at least Tan Sri Gani Patal when he was Attorney General is that they would rather see domestic law enacted first before they sign up to an international convention. While it's true that CEDAW and CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we ratified those international conventions first and then passed the law subsequently. You can see that it took a very long time. We acceded to CEDAW in 95, we acceded to CRC in 95. We didn't really pass the law till 2001. It took a really long time. And so I think the government's approach, and I wouldn't debate with it too much. Let's have domestic legislation first, but then let's get on with it. Let's, having, passed domestic legislation, then let us sign up to the international convention. And signing up to the international convention is important for some of the reasons that Dr. Yazid mentioned, but I would just add this. We need to make it very clear to the world at large that we do not tolerate enforced disappearance, right? It is a sign that we are against impunity for anyone who commits this. And by signing up to the international convention, we actually say that we want to join, or we are going to join, this network of countries that will not allow a person who has committed enforced disappearance to try and seek refuge in another country, right? So we talked about expedited extradition for this case. If we sign up, then we are basically committing ourselves to saying that this is now almost akin to an international crime, that we will cooperate with the international community to make sure that this doesn't happen. I mean, Dr. Yazid is a published author on books on anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. These are international frameworks that Malaysia is a part of. So I don't understand why Malaysia is not interested in being a part of yet another framework dealing with enforced disappearance. I mean, I suppose the question that has to be asked is, if we don't sign up to the convention to protect people from enforced disappearance, are we therefore saying that we approve of enforced disappearance? I mean, the same argument is with the UN Convention Against Torture, which again, the Malaysian government has failed to sign up to. If we are not against torture, Does it mean then that we are for torture? We are in favor of torture? I mean, this cannot be, but that is the perception that's being given, that we are not really bothered about torture. We're not really bothered about enforced disappearance. And this, I think, sends a terribly wrong message to the international community, and merely encourages people who commit these kinds of offenses that maybe, hey, maybe in Malaysia, I can get away with it, or in Malaysia, I can come and hide out in Malaysia because there is no specific offense, no law that prohibits this. I want to spend some time on my third point, which is I have entitled Expanding the Range of Prerogative Writs. Now, this may sound like absolute jargon to you, and so let me explain. At the moment, under Article 5 of our Constitution, we have the concept, although it's not specifically named, of a writ of habeas corpus. I think most of us are familiar with that. Habeas corpus basically means we have the body, and it's a loose translation of Latin. And basically, when you file an application for habeas corpus, you are asking the authorities to produce the person basically who has been detained or arrested. Now, habeas corpus has a major problem in the sense that if you address the application for habeas corpus to the wrong party, that party may turn around and say, well, we don't have that person, and that's the end of that, right? Then you have to try and file another application to go after another party or another party. So you can play this hit and miss kind of game where you don't actually know who's taken this person. And so you may end up wasting a lot of time, trying to track down which is the proper party against which to file this application for habeas corpus. So what I would like to see is the development of two types of new writs, prerogative writs in Malaysia. And one is called the writ of amparo, A-M-P-A-R-O, and the other is the writ of habeas data. Now, the closest neighbor to us that has these kinds of writs is actually the Philippines. And you can understand why the Philippines judiciary actually developed these two writs, because, in times of the military dictatorship, again, you had this game where somebody would get arrested and passed around different military units and things like that. And so having habeas corpus was a waste of time, because somebody would just say, I don't have him, end of story. So the Philippines Supreme Court created these, or developed rather, this writ of amparo. And with the writ of amparo, you basically file a writ to the government itself and say, I don't care who has him or who has the person, you produce that person. So it's not targeted at any one specific entity. It's a general writ to produce the person. And this is actually something that the Philippines court actually took from Mexico, and it's been developed in the Latin American jurisdictions. And the Philippines has had it since 2007. And so I think if we were to allow for the development and introduction of this writ of amparo, it may help us, maybe not in this specific case, but in the possibility of there being future cases, that we won't end up having to waste a lot of time trying to figure out who actually has detained the person. We just go straight to the government and say, pursuant to a writ of amparo, produce the person. Whoever has him, produce him. And then I suppose related to that is this writ of habeas data, which basically means we have information. And so it's again basically saying that, okay, you may not have the person, but you may have information, documents, files, whatever, information about this person. And we want you to produce it. So at least we can begin to trace what has happened to this person. So you can see how it's a parallel to writ of amparo, the idea that somebody within government may have information about a particular person who has gone missing, and you need to produce that information. So I think creating or introducing these writs and whether or not we need to amend the federal constitution, or it's not necessary to amend the constitution, but to again recognize a development from other jurisdictions of this new writ, I think that would be very helpful. And I think the fourth point was I was going to talk about amending the federal constitution, but Dr. Yazid has already spoken a little bit about how in a very wide reading of Articles 149 and 150 of the federal constitution, it seems to say that in certain situations like an emergency, like a state of a declaration of emergency or a state of heightened security, the Article 5 rights of protection can actually be superseded. And so we need either in the Constitution itself or in some substantive law to make it clear that this will not justify or this will not excuse enforced disappearance. So you can't use 149 and 150 to detain someone and subject that person to enforced disappearance, because your argument would be, well, his protection under Article 5 has been superseded. I think we need to make that very clear. And then finally, I think we come to an issue which is quite topical now, which is basically about strengthening the independent oversight of the police. So we have talked about the IPCMC, and now we've seen a bill that's tabled in Parliament to water down the IPCMC, to call it this IPCC, and just give it a general power of investigation without any ability to pursue that investigation. So what is going to happen now if this bill becomes law is that an IPCC, you call it a commission, but it only is allowed to investigate. And then whatever recommendations that it has, whatever findings that it has, it goes up to the Police Force Commission, and then they get to decide what to do next. And there's no provision in the law, in the proposed law, to demand from the Police Force Commission any feedback about what they have done with the complaint, what they have done with the investigation, what disciplinary action they have taken against a particular police officer, or whether even to tell you what they have done. So it's absolute silence. So again, I think that just wholly undermines the idea of an accountable police force. It also undermines any protections that you may have, because if you do it internally, then you don't tell people what you've done. So even if there were to be a case of enforced disappearance and you find out about it, we will not know, we as the public will not know what has happened. We will not know what disciplinary or other action will have been taken against the persons who are responsible for it. And at the end of the day, I just go back to the idea that where the police are concerned, to whom much power is given, much accountability is expected. And if we don't have that, we will just possibly descend into a kind of authoritarianism or despotism where there is no transparency and accountability for the actions of the police. Now, I hope, of course, that none of us, all 4 or 5 of us, I hope we all don't get hauled into the police station after this. The joke about there's freedom of expression, but not freedom after expression. So, we've all made some comments about enforced disappearance. And somebody will just come and complain that we've said something negative about the government or the police about this, and then we'll all get investigated and we'll all have to go to the police station. But at the end of the day, as Susanna has said, we have to take action. We have to do something. Silence is not an option. In fact, silence to me in this case is an offense. To keep quiet, to remain quiet is actually an offense. And if the price of speaking up is that we have to end up, being hauled to the police station, if that's the way it is, then so be it. I think, the time has come to nip this in the bud. I mean, Dr. Yazid talked about 7,000 to 6,000 to 17,000 people in Algeria and many thousands of other people in other parts of the country. For us, it may be just these are the first 5. Maybe not, but these are the first 5 that we know. But, if things get more tense in the future, if we don't stop this now, and if people are not brought to account for the acts of enforced disappearance, who knows how this will increase or this will develop, and there'll be more people. And we already know from the 80s. I mean, I'm a creature of the 80s. The song by Sting, They Dance Alone. The mothers in Chile who talked about dancing without their sons who had been who had undergone enforced disappearance. We have the U2 song about mothers of the disappeared, again from Argentina, the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, who show up every day with pictures of their sons, husbands, fathers who have disappeared. I mean, we don't want to go down that road, and I think we need to stop it now by making sure that we criminalize the act of enforced disappearance. We force the government to act to stop this and to bring people to account. And I can only say that I'm not the relative. I just wonder how Susanna and Norhayati feel. They have been they've had meetings with prime ministers, they've had meetings with senior officers, senior members of government, all giving them assurances that we will look into this, we will find a solution, but nothing's been done. I mean, this is empty promises from, I don't know, from our leaders. How do you have confidence in our leaders when they say pious platitudes and then do nothing about it? I mean, it's truly disappointing, and to me, it's a dereliction of your duty, dereliction of your obligation. And I would dare say, in our country where a lot of us still are people of faith and hold on to religious beliefs, this is a dereliction of our religious duty and obligation. And I don't know how we can go to our places of worship, and pray to our God, knowing that all these things have been done. So I leave it at that. Thank you, Rama.
Thank you very much, Andrew. You've brought some very important perspectives to this. Always good to hear from you. I had actually read about this writ of, what was it called? Amparo. I actually read about this writ of amparo in some things that I read about enforced disappearances in the Philippines, and I didn't really understand what that was. So thank you very much. Now I don't have to ask you that question. Now I have the answer, as do the rest of us. So one of the things that I find, both of you have said, both Dr. Yazid and Andrew, one of the words that you use is accountability. And this whole issue of accountability is so important. And we, of course, thought that, with the Suhakam inquiry, with many things having been said and so on, there would be some sense of accountability. I just want to give a few moments now to Susanna to see if you have any comments, because now you've heard Dr. Yazid and you've heard Andrew. Unfortunately, we don't have Yati with us. But if you have something to say, feel free to add something now.
Yeah, thank you for a very enlightening session, and by Dr. Yazid and Andrew's talk as well. Just want to add that the Koh family and even Amri's family had escalated an urgent action to the United Nations Working Group on the involuntary and enforced disappearance. And as far as I know, they've written to the government, and government have replied and basically said they have done the Suhakam inquiry. But I would like to ask that they follow that up by visiting the country. They have what we call country visits, and to really come to the country to see the situation for themselves, because this is not just one adoption, but it's, as far as we know, 4 that we know of, and seems to be a pattern. And we should take this seriously. And I agree with Andrew, nip it in the bud.
Mr. Rama, you are in silent mode.
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. I was just thanking you there. And I just saw this question. It's for Dr. Yazid. What can we do as individuals and organizations to effectively the public, especially authorities who engage in enforced disappearance, do the right thing, like you said? I often feel that forums like this or articles in Aliran, Malaysia, Kini, etc. are singing to the choir. How can we impact and accelerate change? Perhaps Dr. Yazid, you'd like to start off, and then I also like Andrew to respond to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that very nice question. Wait,
yes,
can you hear me? Okay. Okay, very nice question. What can we do? There's a lot of things we can do. But before I give the answer, why don't we take a moment of silence to pray that the Pastor Koh and Mr. Amri and others can be located, or at least the truth will be revealed. Why don't we start by taking a moment of silence to pray that they will be located and the truth will be revealed?
Let's
we
do
start
that.
by doing that first. Concerning the question, actually there are a lot of things that we can do. First of all, we need to take note that whatever we want to do, we will have a better chance when we work together. That's the first thing. Whatever we do, whatever we decided to do to help, we should be in this together, regardless of our race, religion, ideology and all. If we are together on this matter, that will help us in pushing the government to pass the necessary law to ensure the prevention of enforced disappearance. So whatever we do, make sure we do it together. That being said, when we talk about change, in many cases, we need to be the change that we want to see. If we want to prevent this kind of enforced disappearance, we need to be the change that we want to see. In other words, we must be the driving force. There's a lot of things that we can do, and we can use our imagination. For example, we can start by writing to our politician. We can have this like webinar, and then it is also possible to write to newspaper, or to have meetings between groups, or to consult the stakeholders. Long story short, there are so many things that we can do. But I believe as long as we do it together, we'll have a better chance. I'm not sure whether you have watched a movie or not. There's this movie some time ago, a very interesting movie. The main actor was Andy Lau. The title of the movie was Lost and Found. The movie is about a father whose little baby was abducted. His little baby was abducted in China, and then he spent the next 15 years trying to locate for his baby. The next 15 years. By the way, the story was based on a true story. And then after that, throughout the journey, he traveled throughout China, riding a motorbike with a poster and everything, trying to locate his baby for 15 years. And in the meantime, they have like this network, this NGO that assists in trying to locate babies that has been kidnapped. So from time to time, they manage to help family reconnect with their babies. Some of them have been missing for like 10 years, 20 years. And if you read newspaper a few weeks ago, there's a case in China where they meet back after more than 30 years, after like 20, 30 years, they really meet back the baby. So it is not impossible. But the point is that we need to be in this together. Thank you. That would be my my suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Yazid. Andrew, as an activist for so many years, I'm sure you have something to say.
You know, I mean, I look back, for example, on the issue of abolishing the ISA, and you know, there were many. There was, as Dr. Yazid said, I mean, we all came together, all of us who were opposed to the ISA. We had this Gerakan Mansuhkan ISA, which took in different groups, all from different communities in Malaysia, because we were all united under the you know, the unifying banner call for justice to remove the ISA. And we had street demonstrations, and you know, the police came out with tear gas and stuff like that. But ultimately, you know, when Dr. Sri Najib became Prime Minister, he basically abolished the ISA. And if you look at the Malaysia Kini report, and I'm relying on this report, so if anybody wants to sue me for false news, you just have a look at the Malaysia Kini report. Basically said that the reason why the government had abolished the ISA because it had not worked for the government. Right? It had made martyrs out of ISA detainees, and so it gave them more political exposure. And so in that sense, it didn't work for the government, and that was the reason why they were abolishing the ISA. So the question, if you have that kind of thinking, then the question is, how can we make it not work for the government or for government agencies to carry out enforced disappearance? What is it that they are trying to stop? Right. So, I mean, in the case of the four people who have disappeared, including Saiful, it was about freedom of religion. It was freedom of expression in terms of the right to practice the religion that you had. It was the right to help people who were in a situation where they were trying to exercise their right to freedom of religion. So to me, you know, to honor them and to remember what they are working for, then let's make sure that it doesn't stop, that we continue with this work for religious freedom, so that we can tell whoever it was that took these people away that if your attempt is to snuff this attempt to exercise freedom of religion, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work for you. It's going to give you all a bad name. It's going to tarnish Malaysia's reputation in the international community. And some people say, well, maybe they don't care. But I think at some point in time, at some event, at some occasion, it will matter to them. And so let's do that. So anytime there is, you know, a case of enforced disappearance, let's look at why we think, or why the evidence seems to suggest that they may have become victims of enforced disappearance, and then let's continue to do the work that they were doing, the activities that they were involved in, to make sure that you know, we nullify their efforts. Of course, this is only in cases where what they are doing is within the law, is within their rights. And I'm not saying go out and embrace terrorists and things like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, we also need to work on strengthening the rule of law. And so, yes, I think in this time of COVID-19, when it's a bit more challenging to have peaceful assemblies, we can sit at home and we can write emails. We can bombard, you know, the mailboxes, email boxes of all our 222 MPs, all our senators, and say, look, you know, you need to do something about this, because this is something that affects all Malaysians, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of political affiliation, right? So let's do that. We can, you know, if there was a time where keyboard warriors were called for, because we can't go anywhere else, this is the time that all our keyboard warriors need to come out and need to you know, send emails to you know, and then whatever other social media. If your MP's on Facebook, send him or her notes on Facebook. If your MP's on Twitter or Instagram, do that as well. Just, you know, use every element of social media to get your message across to them, and maybe then they'll at least begin to listen.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Very good response. There are actually not many questions. There's just one more question that, and I know we're above time. I'll just put one more question on. This is from Charles Arul Raja. When will we get an answer to all these forced disappearances? Since there is no respect for Suhakam, our democracy is being tested. Our rights are being violated. I guess, Andrew, your response really applies to this as well. And it's basically to say, look, we should be writing to our MPs, we should be flooding their Facebook pages and so on, because, as good citizens of the world, as Dr. Yazid said, we're concerned about all these people in Argentina, in Syria, in Sri Lanka, even the Uyghurs in China. In the same way, we should be concerned in Malaysia. It's probably about saying, getting the message across using various channels that are available and linking them to the human aspect, as Dr. Yazid brought out so well. I don't know if Dr. Yazid would like to add something to, this non-responsiveness to Suhakam, because basically government has, it's 14 months since this task force was formed. They have not come up with any response. It could also be that, the people have forgotten about this. This is, of course, something that we try to remind people of. But maybe you'd like to respond, Dr. Yazid, and then Andrew.
If I may, we can think about the situation like a dark night. Okay, it's like a night that is very dark. So very dark night. We should not go silently into this dark night. Okay, do not go gentle, do not go silently into this dark night. Make as much noise as we can. Someone will hear it. But if we just remain silent, if we just go silently into this dark night, that will be the end of it. Okay, so that's all I want to add.
Thank you. Andrew?
I think, the task force, I think by now should have submitted its report to the government, and it would have done so to, I think, the minister in charge of law, because Suhakam would have sent him that report, or sent the previous findings of Suhakam to the previous minister. So again, I think this is where you can specifically sort of again direct your keyboard warriorship to the minister in charge of law, and maybe also even to the Minister of Home Affairs, to basically say, look, have you got the report? If you've got the report, when are you going to make it public? What are you going to do about it? And of course, the sad fact is that from previous experience of government, they will try not to make these things public. So if you remember when this 15-year-old boy got shot in Shah Alam by the police, and there was a lot of criticism. What the government did was, again, they set up a task force. They did it very quietly. The results of the task force was not announced. We don't even know. There was even no public statement as to what remedial action did the police take in order to make sure that such an incident didn't happen. So we can't let that happen again. So I totally agree with Dr. Yazid in an excellent quotation from Dylan Thomas's poem, right? Do not go quietly into that dark night. We can't afford to do that. Maybe the kind of dark night that we should have is a Batman kind of dark night. So not NIGHT, but KNIGHT. So we have to go out and perhaps do a little bit of combating of evil. So not just not go quietly into the dark night, but become a little bit like a superhero and go out and challenge the authorities to make known, to make public the findings of the task force and what's going to be done.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Susanna, would you like to say a few last words before I close?
Just one thing. one point that this respect for human rights. We can see from other countries that it is a process, and sometimes it takes years to even develop. And I think each action, each event that builds on this will, in a way, give us the result after some time. And I think we should not give up or lose hope. We should continue to educate ourselves and be interested in what is happening in our country, in these areas that we are passionate about. And yeah, I agree with Andrew and Dr. Yazid about going further by writing to your MPs and the ministers and things like that.
Thank you very much, Susanna. It is my very great pleasure to thank Dr. Yazid, Andrew, Susanna, and Norhayati, and also we had Esther on video. Tomorrow is the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances, and I was very touched, that Dr. Yazid asked for a moment of silence for us. And as I was thinking about, as I was thinking during that minute, I just had this picture of all these people around the world, and also in our own country, and how they are also struggling with these issues. It's not just us, but I think that we have the opportunity to make a difference. And I'm delighted that we had Dr. Yazid, like I said, an Islamic scholar, a legal scholar, one who has written so much. So maybe I should prompt Dr. Yazid to write a book about enforced disappearances. I might be able to understand that one rather than one about cryptocurrency. But this has been really awesome, and I see the comments. There are so many comments. Thank you to all our viewers on Facebook. Thank you for those who have written all these comments. I see that Dr. Yazid's presentation and Andrew's presentation were deeply valued. So thank you so much.
Rama, may I say just something very quickly?
Sure.
I mean, of course, the 31st is the day that we recognize Merdeka for Malaya. And then, of course, in 16 days' time, we will celebrate Malaysia Day. And I've just seen on my TV, on Astro, some public service announcements saying, what does independence mean to you? And what are you going to do about it? So I would want to link this idea of freedom from enforced disappearance, right? You want to talk about Merdeka, then let's be Merdeka from kehilangan paksa. Let's be free from enforced disappearance. And then what are we going to do about it? Then let us commit ourselves, in the year ahead to work, to do whatever we can to make sure that this does not develop, and that people have the answers, the results, and the justice that they require to give them peace of mind, so that at least they know what has happened to their loved ones, and life can go on for them as well. So let that be our Merdeka and Malaysia Day prayer for our country.
That's a great comment. Thank you very much, Andrew. If there's nothing from anyone else, do you want to say something, Dr. Yazid? Or
yes, I just want to say to the family of the victim, Madam Susanna, and all, that our prayers are always with you.
Thank you.
And with that, we end this webinar.